You're listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about living and leading worship. Let's lean into today's episode.
Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us for Worshipology. This is a podcast for worship teams, worship leaders, and worshipers of Jesus Christ. And it's just been so fun this season to talk to some brand new guests. And today we are talking with Diane Sheets. She is a vocal coach based out of the Nashville, Tennessee area. And I got to meet Diane back in 2017. We went on a mission trip with Brad and Rebecca to Uganda and just got to spend some awesome time with her. And we recently had Diane out to do a vocal clinic for all of our singers at Destination Church. She's amazing. Diane, say what's up on Worshipology.
What's up, Worshipology? I totally forgot about the Uganda thing. I mean, since that time, you and I have maintained a friendship. And like you said, I came out to the church and did some stuff out there. But yeah, Uganda, that was amazing.
Mission trips are like relationship builders times 10 because you just do crazy things that you would never do anywhere else, you know?
Totally.
So it was awesome.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, anytime you do mission work, I mean, it's just so powerful. But I think what was so amazing about that particular trip is that we were working with kids like middle school, high school, early college age, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And most of them were a part of our mission because they were skilled in music and singing and production and literature, writing, preaching, and to be able to spend time with them was, it kind of checked yourself, and that was an amazing time to be able to get to spend with these young people who love Jesus and wanted to dedicate their life and make a massive change in their own country by staying in their own country and leading and speaking truth and preaching the gospel. It's very inspiring.
Anytime you get a chance to go on a mission trip, it gets you out of your element. And totally. I think it was Mark Batterson who said change of place plus change of pace equals change of perspective. And totally. I think we all came out with a different perspective on our calling, on our gift, how we even use what God's called us to do in the church. And what was really cool for me to see you do that I also got to see here in the United States at our church is just how you can work with anybody as a vocal coach and draw out the potential that lies in them to such a degree that they didn't even know they had. And so I want to get into all that. But man, for our listeners, like Diane, just kind of tell a little bit of your ministry story. Like, how did you get into singing and coaching and working with worship teams? And now, I mean, you're working with Casting Crowns. You've worked with even like Sadie Robertson on like speaking and going there. So it's just really cool to kind of see the landscape of different artists that you work with. But tell us how you got there. Yeah,
absolutely. So I grew up in the church and was a part of worship ministries. And I mean, back in the day, there wasn't like worship music. It was like choir music.
Yeah.
And so, I was in the choir and I did the cantatas and, all of that stuff. But it really helped develop me musically. And then just a love for church music and just learning to love the church. The church is messy, right?
Oh, yeah.
But being a part of, the church and that growing up in the church music ministries, really helped put me on a path to, want to serve in the church. And actually, when I went to college, my goal was to be a choir director. I mean, that was kind of the thing. Wow. I wanted to be a church choir director. I don't know that I've ever told anybody that, but that's what that's
well, your secret is no longer safe, Diane. It's out there.
It's out there now. But I just love choirs. I love the idea that you have this group of worshipers that are facing other worshipers, even just from a space perspective. You got a group of worshipers on stage, you got worshipers in the room, and it's just, I love it. So I went to college. Right out of high school, I went to a conservatory of music in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I'm from.
Cool.
And Capital University. And I spent a couple years there, and honestly, didn't have enough money to go back to college. So I worked for a couple years and ended up getting a scholarship to Liberty University.
Okay.
And ended up moving out to Lynchburg and finishing up my degree in music with Liberty. And that was a great experience. It was a different environment. The School of Music that's there now is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And their worship collective and all of that. But so it really gave me a good basis. And after college, I did go and work at a church as a choir director. I worked in children's ministry. I worked with senior citizens, and it was a blast. So kind of well-rounded. But it wasn't too long after that I ended up in Nashville, and I was working for a small production company, and we had an agreement with Word Choral.
Okay, yeah.
And we worked with a premier orchestrator by the name of Larry Goss, and this guy's a legend. Working in that particular job, I was able to touch all facets of the Christian music industry, everything from like publishing to like session work, studio sessions, setting up players, and what was all involved in that, musical arrangements and orchestrations. And then we actually took these projects that we were developing for Word, and once they were published, we would turn it around and market it back to the churches and go in and record their singers.
Oh, wow.
And their soloists. And so then having a piece of that, working with churches was, a big part of my job. And so I just felt like that was a really good experience to get a lot of, like I said, different facets of the music industry, not just from like the industry, but also the church side of it as well.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a couple years, and not long after that, I met a girl who was a voice researcher. And she was a medical arts director at the Ohio State University Voice and Swallowing Disorders Clinic.
Wow.
And,
now that is a mouthful in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's an impressive job title.
Wow.
She and a group of voice researchers and scientists were putting together a vocal training model that was based in science and acoustics.
Okay.
And I spent a couple years working with her and being mentored by her. And it really changed my life. I really became passionate about the voice and how to use your voice in an effective way. And I started hearing things differently because I would understand the anatomy and physiology of the voice and its manipulations and how to achieve certain sounds. And if there was something that was either risky or potentially traumatic to the voice, like being able to understand what a person was doing and then being able to communicate in a way that would help them understand what they were doing and then be able to achieve the same type of acoustic sounds, but not in such a risky way. So I began teaching some workshops based on this vocal training method early on to work with a country music band, actually.
Okay.
Was my first, legit pro client. And that band was Diamond Rio. And
wow.
So I don't know if any of your listeners would know who they are.
Man, come on. You talk about legends.
They are legends, seriously. And that really helped turn their career around at that time. And I think people in the industry started talking about what happened with them. And then the word just sort of spread. And I ended up with an opportunity to work with Mike Donaghy from 10th Avenue North.
Yeah.
When they had their very first single, it was a song called By Your Side. And I think Mike would be okay with me sharing this. When they were in the studio recording that song, on the bridge, there was a really high note, and I think he said he was able to sing it twice in the studio, sort of in pieces, and the producer edited the vocal together, but he wasn't able to sing it live.
Yeah.
And they had an opportunity to go out on tour with Mercy Me, their very first supporting tour with a pretty big headliner. And their single went to number one, and he wasn't able to sing it live. And so the record label actually came to me and said, "Hey, we've heard about you. Would you be willing to work with Mike and see if you can get him singing this song? Because he's going to need to sing it for radio and live and all that." And I did. And we worked together, and just a short couple sessions, and he was able to sing it like after the first session. And my boy told everybody.
What's amazing to me about hearing that story is I think a lot of listeners and worship leaders in particular would probably agree with this, that, there's obviously on the drums, you can get insecure about playing a part and then you just shy away from playing that part. Or on guitar, maybe, because I've had to play a lot of lead guitar lately. I just kind of like pick the easiest way to play the part and then I just do that or use a capo or whatever. When it comes to singing, it may be, and you would know this better than I would, it might be one of the biggest musical endeavors that we find our biggest insecurities on. And, most worship teams that I've served on, that I've had an opportunity to lead, have way more singers than musicians. So your team is comprised of all of these singers doing the one thing that has potentially the biggest insecurity in music. And, even like this last Sunday, there was a note that I was trying to hit falsetto, and I hit it the first service. I didn't hit it the second service. So I'm like, maybe I just shouldn't sing that way again, and you just get in your head. There's so many mind games that you can play. Talk to us a little bit about what does it look like on the psychological side as you're singing, and then just, how it relates spiritually, like, as God's called you to do this, but you're still battling, and then sometimes you go on the other side where you hit the note and your ego just gets inflated. And, so there's like that balance between insecurity and over security or ego. How do you approach that when you're working with the singer, and how have you seen that? Like with Mike, I mean, obviously, like once you can sing that and it just brings this different sort of confidence that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Singing is so mental, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, like you said, even for a guitar player, they can get in their head about something, and then all of a sudden they can't play something that they are skilled to be able to do. They've rehearsed it, but I think for singers, there is that dynamic that your instrument is inside your body. And, if something happens to it, if it goes down, or you get sick, or it, quote unquote kind of breaks, you can't take it to a store and get it fixed. You can't, it's inside your body, and, we have to take care of it. So vocal health is like so important, but also just understanding the instrument. It's not something that we can like take out and look at, like you can look at a guitar or drums or keyboard or whatever. The mechanics of it are sort of a mystery, though there's a lot of voice science and a lot of access to information now that you can learn about your instrument and what it does and how to take care of it. And I think that that's an important piece. Knowledge breeds confidence.
Wow.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
And so, I get a lot of requests from like labels or management when they're looking at new artists, and they're like, hey, would love for you to work with this singer. And, our big priority is just confidence. Well, you can't just teach somebody confidence. The way that you foster confidence is knowledge.
Wow.
If you know how to do something, then you can be confident in that. You understand how to do it, So
That's really
I think
good.
that, yeah, right. It is good. I mean, and it's it challenges us. It checks us like, hey, am I a good steward of my gift by being knowledgeable? And I just find a lot of, especially young singers, kind of getting into singing, maybe not necessarily like worship per se, but that they just kind of do what they do, right? Just kind of, I got this thing that I do and this sound, and I don't really need to know how to do it. It's just, that's just what I do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's sort of a cop out.
Well, what's so cool is as you're talking about the voice, I keep hearing you say instrument. And I don't think a lot of singers would just naturally default to, this is an instrument. Like, my voice is an instrument. So just like I wouldn't throw my guitar around or, leave it in the cold in my car during the winter, your voice is another instrument that you can take care of, that you have to take care of. And
absolutely.
I mean, like when you're working with a singer and you kind of have that aha moment, and speaking from experience, it was so fun for us to host you and have you in to do a vocal clinic, because if I can count the number of times I heard people go, oh, like in the room as you were giving your workshop, it was just those moments where it's like, you think and then you're taught something and it's like, wow, everything that I thought I knew up until now just got wrecked. And then you just begin to operate in this different mode now that you know something you didn't know before. As you're working with, and you travel around, you go on tour with artists, what's kind of like that main thing that you're just like, because repetition is the key to learning. And so you find yourself, maybe there's that one thing that you find yourself over and over again, whether it's an artist or working with a label or with a church, that you're like, this is kind of the common thread that I see in going from point A to point B.
Yeah. From a technical standpoint, I find that one of the biggest things that I talk about is placement, placement of tone. So, where is your tone focused in space? I know that sort of that's very conceptual, right? But what I find is that many singers are affecting their voice, and some of that affect can be either traumatic or constricting to the voice or limiting to the voice.
Yeah.
And helping people to understand the difference between the using an affect or being a slave to an affect.
Wow.
And I find that singers start to mimic other people and styles, and then they become like locked into this stylistic thing that's actually not theirs. It's not something that's natural to them. And then they've created these habits that aren't actually effective for them as a communicator. And all art, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's like dancing or literature, architecture, film, whatever it may be, it's all about communication. Art is about communication. And if you look up the definition of art, and we hear people say this, I'm an artist, I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a worship leader, it's all this art thing, which it is. But if you look up the definition of art, it's something that's created with skill. And so if you just take that skill and look at that word, I mean, there's something that you need to do and perfect constantly be perfecting and working at that skill. But it's created with skill that expresses an important idea or feelings. And as worship leaders, I mean, it's a sobering thought here, but we carry the greatest message of the world, which is the gospel. And so when you think about yourself as an artist, and you think about the fact that your art is about the most important message in the world, that should be a sobering thought as to how you treat your instrument, how you create with it, how you let it speak.
Wow.
And it needs to be authentic to who God created you to be. And, so whether it's like a live performance or in the studio or whatever environment it may be where I'm working with a singer, one of my big jobs is to help eliminate distractions.
Well, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, because a distraction prevents a listener from getting to the message. And the message is the most important part, you know? And so getting back to placement, helping a singer really speak and let the unique characteristics of their voice come out as they are speaking a message, even though that speech is influenced by musical notes and all of that, it's still about speaking. And I think that if we get that in our head, that my job as a worship leader is not to perform.
Wow.
It is to communicate and lead. I think it just changes the paradigm of where we should be focused.
That's so big because, as you were talking about the definition of really what it is to create art, I mean, this is something we've said here on the podcast before, that Psalm 33 verse 3, sing a new song, shout with joy, and play with skill. And in the Hebrew, that means like that skill portion is like, whatever you do with excellence, make it beautiful for the Lord. I think when you talk about the difference between performance and communication, even.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the pressure just kind of releases off of you because when you're in performance mode, you take on a lot of that pressure. Like, what if I mess up? What if I hit a wrong note? But when you're communicating, it's more like, man, I really hope the message that I'm called to communicate gets through. And it puts a lot more emphasis on the role of the Holy Spirit. Like we always joke around that like, hey, like Sunday morning, it's not your reputation at stake, it's God's. And he does a pretty good job of defending his reputation. He does a pretty good job of being who he is. And we just get the opportunity to carry that message. As you've worked with worship teams and worship leaders, man, I'd just love to hear one or two maybe stories or just like examples of like how they've gone from that pressure, like, man, like, yeah, it's all on me to like, cause I see the confidence come back when you work with somebody. There's just this restoration of the potential that is in you. We can unlock that and that can come out. Cause I think like we've said before in this conversation, there's the mental Olympics that you go through when you're not hitting a note or when you're not singing up to your potential. And, when it comes to leading worship, Sunday is always around the corner. And so it's one of those things that I think you just have to stay locked in. What's something that you've kind of seen in helping people not get lost in the mental games,
Yeah. The first thing that kind of comes to mind, and it's something that I always talk about, it's speaking to the audience that's in front of you. What I mean by that is, and I think we all can put ourselves in situations where we've experienced this, where the worship leader is, let's say this worship leader is leading a church of 500 people, and that's their congregation size. Maybe there's 300 to 500 people in a room. Yeah. However, that worship leader, in his mind, and the audiences aren't stupid, they're actually pretty smart. They can tell when that worship leader is actually singing to an audience of 10,000 that is in his mind.
Wow.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how many times have you possibly experienced someone on stage who isn't actually speaking to the audience in front of him? It's almost like he's performing, quote unquote, performing to the arena.
Wow.
That he has, maybe he's mimicking an artist who is performing for those, a live performance of, worship in a room of 10,000 people. However, his job is to speak to those 500 people that are in a room with him or her.
Wow.
And I do find that is a challenge. Understanding that you need to speak to the people in front of you. So all of these, like phrases that may not be applicable for your congregation, you're speaking things that they're flippant phrases.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that we need to check ourselves on that, that we really need to prepare what it is that the Lord has put on your heart to speak to your people.
Wow.
And to the people in front of you.
That's really good because, I just remember early on in my church planting phase, I would just you get these illusions of grandeur, and then you also get the ultimate lows when maybe your expectation isn't met, and there's that gap of frustration, And then I just remember hearing my dad, who's also a church planter and pastor up in New York, and he told me, you can only love the people who are in front of you.
Yes. Yes.
You can only preach to who's in front of you right then and there.
Yes.
Yes. And we see this example, obviously, with Jesus. It's like any room that he walked into, he was there for those people. Mm-hmm. He was there with the blind man. He was there with the lepers. He was there with the sick and the crippled and the downcast and broken. And I think that's a beautiful reminder to all of us because in a day and age where, you can get online and you immediately... And this has been a common thread in our conversation with singing and leading worship. There's that danger of imitation. There's the danger of mimicking. And it's like, man, God didn't call you to be so-and-so. God called you to be you and to love the people and to lead the people that are in front of you. That's a great reminder, Diane.
Yeah. I hope this person is okay with me sharing the story. But I recently started working with a guy by the name of Sean B. I don't know if he was on Winter Jam this past year, 2023. He came from a background where he was a worship pastor and like a family pastor at a church out in Denver. And he was using rap to like get his kids engaged. Yeah. Like speaking to them in a language that they were going to actually hear him. So he was writing a bunch of rap music and then started writing more CCM pop kind of stuff. And anyway, he ended up through some, just God directing and on this Winter Jam platform. And so he went from, his small church and some small concerts that he was doing to tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And he's a hard worker, this guy. Oh my goodness. And he's only been singing for like 2 years or 3. I mean, he was more rapping, but he's learning to sing. And this guy is so dedicated and such a hard worker. He's all about perfecting his skill, and he worked like crazy for this Winter Jam set. Yeah. And so every night for months on end, he was performing to these crowds of 10,000 people or more, whatever it may be. And, some people got interested. People, as far as like industry people, were a couple record labels and some booking agents asked him to put together a showcase. And so that's where I became engaged with him and his team, was to put together this showcase for labels and booking. And so we started working together, and our first rehearsal where he was going to kind of show me what he was going to do. You know, he had his showcase planned out. Mm-hmm. And man, I mean, he was dancing and jumping around and the things that he was like shouting out to the audience, it was like, you know, you were in an arena. And I said, look, some of the most impactful showcases that I've ever seen was when the artist actually spoke to the people in the room.
Wow.
Again, it's speaking to the people in the room. And I said, I know you've got all this muscle memory that you know, that's for these big arenas. However, you're going to be in a room with industry people who I know it's going to feel like a lot of pressure and you want to make everything right and perfect. But at the end of the day, they are people with the same struggles
wow.
and trials that you have. They're married or single. They have children. They have families. They have financial issues. Yeah. They have fears. You need to speak to them.
Wow.
And it changed the whole way that we approached this showcase. He went up there and really spoke to them.
Wow.
And the biggest feedback that we got from the booking agents and the record labels is, wow, this guy is an amazing communicator.
Wow.
And that's what it's all about, because he actually said something that stuck with them. I know every person that was in that room walked out with something that hit them, where the Holy Spirit had an opportunity to minister.
Yeah.
And it was a showcase.
Wow.
Which, I mean, just the definition of that, just, you know.
Show like is in the title. Right.
Yeah, right. It's a show. But you know, when you have a calling in your life that is to minister and speak to people, believers, lost or the church, you have to get out of the way and you have to speak to them directly and, you know, eliminate those distractions and allow the Holy Spirit the space to really minister to people.
Wow. We don't have much time left. I just want to, I know, I feel like I could talk to you for another hour and we'd be scratching the surface here. You know, I'm excited to just see how this impacts people. You're always such an inspiration and a motivator every time I talk to you and just get around you. Diane, thank you so much for just encouraging me today. And I know everybody who listens will be encouraged. Don't be an imitator. Find your voice. Love the people in front of you and find that confidence. You're the best.
Yes.
We're going to put some show notes in there just on how people can contact Diane. And yeah, you're the best. Thank you just for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks. To learn more and to find resources for worship leaders and teams, you can visit kurtisparks.com.